Golden Kamuy, easily one of the best treasure hunting animes out there. And yes, that includes One Piece. By gum, pop out of the blue after nearly a year and open up with those fighting words. My apologies about the delay. Work has kept me preoccupied for nearly a year, so haven't had time to make many videos. I'm going to work on a better upload schedule from here on out. Hopefully, if all goes well, I can do it twice a month if my school allows. But we'll see. I still don't know exactly how busy I'm going to be with this new schedule. Well, you don't need to worry about my schedule. I'll work on it and keep you posted. In the meantime, let's talk about headshots. Indeed, for those of you that have seen this anime, we know that there are a plethora of injuries sustained by the main cast. If you haven't seen Golden Kamuy, go watch it. It's fantastic, because there will be spoilers in this video. The injury I'm focusing on in this video, of course, is Sugimoto's headshot that he received at Abashiri Prison. I know there's Lieutenant Tsurumi's head injury, however, due to the nature of their injuries, I'm going to focus primarily on Sugimoto's because otherwise this video is just going to get much too long. Alright, without further ado, cue the theme song. Haha, got you, didn't I? I still don't have a theme song. But I do have a much better setup now. Hopefully you guys can actually hear it, right? Better mic quality? Ugh, what am I doing? Enough of that, you don't care. Let's jump right into the science. Let's start with what the anime establishes about the injury in and of itself. I'm going to play the actual scene, followed by the medical treatment Sugimoto receives.
Immortal Sugimoto, how does it feel to be missing a part of your brain? You know this makes us brain damage buddies, don't you?
I can't believe you were once a great doctor. You're a murderer. There's a thin line between genius and insanity, but...
I've done many cranial surgeries. My little torture hobby has been a great way to learn. I'd cut out tiny bits of their brain, then they'd watch while I fried it up and eat it, right in front of them, with ginger soy. Anyway, only someone with Sugimoto's capacity for recovery could have survived that.
So, as you can see, nothing much is clearly established in the particulars of the wound. So unless I'm missing something that didn't come up in my research, I'm going to have to establish my own details. I want to give Sugimoto the best chances of survival, but also keep it grounded within the series. In the scene, we can determine that Okuta is firing from this tower, and most likely using his favorite Marauder rifle. So I'm going to estimate that the tower is roughly 150 meters away and is about 25 meters tall, which gives us a hypotenuse of 152 meters, which I got that through a squared plus b squared equals c squared, as we all took basic geometry before, so we should know that. Speaking of basic geometry, we can also use geometry to determine the angle at which the bullet strikes Sugimoto. Given this equation here, we can use it to calculate the angle by which that bullet would strike Sugimoto. This will be important later. Simply put in the dimensions of the shot, and that gives us roughly an angle of 9.46. We'll pocket that for later. The amount of energy the round has can be estimated with a simple equation of kinetic energy equals mass times velocity. Given the distance and aerodynamics of the round as it travels towards Sugimoto, and wanting to give Sugimoto the best possible odds, by the time it hits him, the round will roughly have 800 joules of energy. To be honest though, the range could vary between 800 to 2000 joules, but as I said, I'm looking at best case scenario for Sugimoto here. It's already hard enough to try to justify why a man survives a headshot. So, summarizing the physics we covered, we have Ogata using a Marauder rifle with a 152 meter shot at a 9.46 degree angle, and roughly 800 joules of energy being imparted upon Sugimoto's head. So, what exactly is happening once the bullet reaches Sugimoto? To answer that, let's move on to my favorite subject, and that is, of course, biology, and more accurately, the subsection anatomy. Starting with the skull and followed by the brain, both of which are rather fascinating. Not my favorites, that honor belongs to the lungs, but they're still pretty interesting nonetheless. The area of interest for this situation is going to be the frontal lobe, and for the skull, the frontal bone, which is nice and simple, right? Now, there are a couple important characteristics for the frontal area, starting with the bone. The frontal bone makes up most of your forehead and the curve as it goes back to the cranium. It's designed to take simple impacts. Now, the bone is made up of various chemicals, but the primary one we want to focus on is called hydroxyapatite, which is now, as I realize saying that out loud, is the first time I actually tried to pronounce this. Anyways, hydroxyapatite is a calcium phosphate crystal that makes up most of the inorganic material, allowing for the bone's hardness. The flexibility of bones comes from a chemical known as collagen type 1. So these are the basic compounds that make up of the bone that allow it to remain flexible, but primarily giving its hardness and durability, allowing it to protect our squished young organs underneath. Now, moving on to the frontal lobe, luckily, it isn't responsible for any of the basic vital functions like breathing and heart rate. The frontal lobe is generally responsible for higher cognitive functions such as decision making, motor coordination, personality, and parts of memory. With this in mind, a wound to this lobe is technically survivable given the right set of circumstances. Let's be honest though, any wound to the brain is more often than not lethal, especially in a wartime zone. If you are interested in more studies on the frontal lobe, may I suggest the case of Phineas Gage? I won't cover this case as everyone and their mother seems to talk about this case in every single classroom setting, but I'll link an article in the description for you to understand it. I reference Phineas Gage simply because he's a man that received a frontal brain injury roughly 150 years ago. I don't mean to reduce a man into a case study, but I do bring him up because his set of circumstances and injury are similar to Sugimoto's. Alright, enough about Phineas Gage, let's delve into Sugimoto. So, given all that we covered so far, would Sugimoto reasonably be able to survive this headshot? Reasonably? Absolutely not. None of the human body was designed to withstand modern weapons. Almost like we were never designed to kill each other to begin with. The skull is nowhere near as tough as we like to pretend it is. It only takes roughly 100 joules of energy to cause a fracture. Not guaranteed, but possible. And as for penetrations, 500 joules of energy is all it takes to reliably pierce the skull. So yes, given the scenario, Sugimoto is most likely going to die from the shot. And yes, dying is almost a guarantee simply because the ballistic physics of the bullet once it enters the skull would turn the brain into mush. First, the penetration is going to cause the bone to fragment into the brain, causing secondary injuries. Secondly, and more lethally, the ballistics of the bullet would cause cavitation within the skull, which is kind of like shockwaves, and given how soft the brain is, it isn't going to bounce back from this. These factors are going to drastically decrease survivability, even if it's just the frontal lobe. The energy dispersion of the bullet would be too catastrophic in the real world. Especially since we do not see any exit wound in this scene, it is likely to conclude that the bullet remained in the brain, meaning that all the energy from that round was dispersed into the brain itself. The best way you can conclude this is that he's not going to survive this. However, since this is fiction, the author is allowed to take certain liberties and take the infeasible, not impossible, option of surviving this shot. Actually, there is a way to even increase Sugimoto's chances of survival in regards to this situation. One that is in keeping with the circumstances of the story and may even be possible given the circumstances. And that's if the round was a glancing hit, as the bullet's trajectory caused it to bounce off Sugimoto's skull, and the resulting brain injury was a result of the bone fragmentation rather than the bullet's penetration. Recall how I said to pocket that angle of penetration, 9.46, for later. This angle actually allows for the possibility of a glancing hit. Not guaranteed, very small chances, but it is possible. This would severely limit the damage done to Sugimoto while still being in keeping with the brain injury we see displayed throughout the series. While a glancing hit is not likely to occur, it still is possible, and given the two options of him surviving a bullet wound to the frontal lobe or a glancing hit occurred, the odds of the glancing hit are actually higher than that of surviving cranial penetration. To put it more simply, I'm proposing that instead of the bullet actually penetrating Sugimoto's skull and entering his brain, the angle by which the bullet struck Sugimoto's skull caused it to glance off, fracturing the skull and causing bone fragments to tear up his frontal lobe. So, to conclude, my theory of how Sugimoto survived his headshot is due to the range and angle of Okuta's shot. The bullet glanced off Sugimoto's frontal bone, never penetrating him, but causing the portion of the skull to fragment and those fragments causing the brain injury. A couple of key factors to support this is that we never see an exit wound, meaning all of the bullet's energy was dispersed into the brain, which is highly dangerous, which is something I mentioned before. And 2, the series never establishes that they removed the bullet from the brain, or if there even was a bullet to remove from his head to begin with. Meaning, my hypothesis of a glancing shot and bone fragmentation may even be in keeping with the story and isn't contradicted by it. So given all this, the odds of him surviving the bone fragments would be much more likely than the actual bullet itself. And given Sugimoto's vitality, it is reasonable, not plausible, to assume that he could recover from this. So, what do you think? Am I missing anything that in this hypothesis? Is there more to headshots that I failed to address? Let me know what you think. In the meanwhile, time to see how deadly this blood really is. We may have to block this battlefront. Take care, everyone, and God bless.